Servants are the cornerstone of Fate Grand Order, so of course whenever we get a new story chapter, we get a ton of new ones to look at. Some are good, some are bland, and some just kinda make your eyes bleed. But fortunately, I'd say we got a pretty good batch with the newest story chapter, Traum. And I thought it'd be fun to take a look to see who's the best, who's the worst, and where does everyone fall in between. So let's rank the Traum servants from worst to best. Small disclaimer, who I picked as Traum servants was kind of arbitrary, so don't expect Jufu, Minamoto no Tametomo, or Sugitani Zunjibo. With that stated, let's get into the list. And our absolutely worst design out of the Traum servants is... Roland! First, I'd like to clarify that just because his design is the worst doesn't necessarily mean I think it's bad. Me saying that his design is mostly garbage does though, because man, this guy should not be allowed to dress or undress himself. I can give the design some credit in the first art though. The colors work really well together and his outfit is overall pretty striking, if not a little too busy, with his ribbons, unlaced shirt, strapped on collar, and the belt and skirt around his waist. And his confident gaze and simple but impactful sword establish him as a competent fighter as well. Plus, that small peek at his chest through the straps and tie he wears is a window into his stranger habits. He has this odd blend of eccentricity and dashing hero that really sell who he is as a character. It's a surprisingly solid and thoughtful design. One that immediately gets thrown out the window! His second art manages to completely off-balance the design for me. Roland's odd gimmick is his propensity to strip, so now that we see his torso is totally exposed aside from some straps in his tie. Great, it's a part of his character, so why is it bad? Simple! Because they won't dedicate to the bit! They expose the chest, but actually added more clothing to his arms, which not only looks awkward, but undercuts the stripping gimmick entirely. I'm not sure who thought bare chest and poofy sleeves was this year's hottest fashion, but keep them far away from Roland from now on, because the man is not rocking this look. The irony of him being shirtless here is that it keeps my eyes away from his middle, since his pants and sleeves are taking up twice the space they were before, and just doing a better job of drawing the eye. And the issue only gets worse when we get to his third art, where his clothes gain brighter colors, especially a lot of gold. If that weren't enough to kneecap the whole naked thing, the fact that he actually puts more clothes on here doesn't help. Roland is generally a good-hearted, hard-working paladin. But here he looks so self-important thanks to the gold armor and tassels adorning him. It doesn't even come off remotely close to fitting his personality. And the final art does nothing to help sell the outfit, as it just changes his pose and give him a random assortment of sparkles, which, surprise surprise, isn't helping anything either. Roland is fantastic in Traum, but his design is not living up to the character. Fortunately, I'd say our next servant does a much better job overall. In 8th place, we have Salome. Now, I'm sure some of you are thinking, but Crow, Salome didn't debut during Traum, she's been around for years. And you're right, but I can't think of anywhere else to talk about her, so here we are. This princess wears an ornate dancing outfit that shows off her body and leaves her radiating sex appeal. Her most notable appearances in stories often depict her as being a symbol of lust, so that blatant sexiness to her does her justice. And the red and gold of the outfit are fitting for her status as royalty. Her purple eyes and green hair is distinct and helps sell her as a total beauty. A beauty that, mind you, is sitting on a giant decorated blue skull. If you don't know Salome's tale, it can be synopsisized by saying she danced for the king, and as a reward asked for the head of John the Baptist, who she had become infatuated with, which is why she has all these skulls flying around her. They serve not only to tie the design to her stories, but end up being the fatal flaw of this design. Now, don't get me wrong, the coloration and art of the skulls is great, but the way they're used here is fundamentally harmful to Salome. Her claim to fame is the Dance of the Seven Veils, something referenced by her own skills. So then, why is the dancer not dancing? In fact, why are her feet not even touching the ground? Look, I don't think accuracy to source material is the end-all, be-all thing for designs in Fate Go. As far as I'm concerned, the series is more loosely inspired by history and myth rather than beholden to it. But in a case like this, where it willingly ignores arguably the most important thing about the character, we get problems. With the way they put so much emphasis on the skulls here, Salome goes from this deranged dancer to just a woman obsessed with a head. Like, there's two notable things about this woman, and you completely cut one out to put more emphasis on the other. And the Ascensions don't even help since they just add more veils and give her a less impactful color scheme. Luckily, the final Ascension not only does something with her, but restores her colors. She bends in a way that makes her body look fairly enticing, while keeping important parts just out of view. For a character rooted in sex appeal, that bit of teasing is just the cherry on the top. And, kind of importantly here, she's actually using her feet for something, holding her beloved skull between them. Plus, the way she's bent here actually makes her look flexible like you'd expect a dancer to be. And the skulls lurking beneath the veil add a good contrast to the scene to make it more representative of Salome, a symbol of both lust and death. It doesn't totally make up for what I believe is the fundamental flaw of the design, but it definitely does a lot to make it more tolerable. But our entry in number 7 doesn't have as much good to say about him, but no standout faults to drag him down either. Here we have Constantine the 11th. His first art starts off with a black suit and red vest and gloves that give him a well-kept professional look, perfect for his more mild-mannered attitude. And the sword in his hand and expression makes him look determined without betraying any emotion on his face. He looks cool without being over the top, which is fitting to who he is as a character. I'd say here he's the very definition of a 6 out of 10, which is a sentiment that stays strong with the second art. He changes out of his suit for some armor, and red becomes the dominant color with the black drawing attention to his arms, legs, and chest. He keeps the professional vibe, but in a more militaristic way thanks to the overhaul in style. The armor is well detailed, and he has these silver flourishes throughout that you might expect to see on a man of his status. Despite looking more geared up for a fight here, the irony is that his sword becomes much less noticeable, hanging from his hip and being hidden behind his other clothing for the most part. The most interesting thing here might be the way his entire look changes so dramatically, while still keeping him feeling very similar. And the way that the two arts keep the same two dominant colors supports that, giving a clear through line between the outfits. Not that I can say it's a very long through line because it stops after the first two. Because his third armor puts him in much more regal looking armor and cape that tones down the red in favor of white, removing all black from the outfit and adding it to his hair, which now has long, luscious locks. Looking good, my man. Once again, he has a very nondescript expression, but with the royal vibe created by his hair and attire here, the feeling of it changes. While the first two arts had Constantine ready to fight, this one makes him feel like a ruler. The sturdy pose and his hand resting on the hilt of his blade show his unwavering spirit. His cape is where most of the red is added back to the design, and is lined with gold crosses because that was kind of a big deal with good old Eastern Rome. And the jeweled armor itself seems to draw from Byzantine art. A specific example I found would be this portrait of Alexios I, who wears a similar looking robe. And of course, the sword has been changed to fit with his new aesthetic, with shiny, glittery gems to show his status. The third art shows us exactly who he is. He's the Emperor of the Byzantine Empire, and he looks every bit the part here. But don't worry, they definitely didn't forget his capability for fighting, as the final art shows him riding into battle on a white horse, likely showing his charge to his death. It's simple, and really only shows off his final design being gallant, but like the rest of his ascensions, it's perfectly fine. Just not a whole lot more than fine. It's fitting for him given his calm demeanor, but it lacks just some of the deeper stuff we can get from the other designs in Traum. If he came out in year 1, I'd say he looks pretty great, but he's got a lot of competition this far in. And his next bit of competition is someone a bit more villainous, because number 6 is James Moriarty Ruler. This miniature king of crime is well put together, and maybe brought just a little too much to class. He wears this patterned vest and striped pants along with a tie to represent his favorite anime. Muzan's probably his role model. He has this long jacket with a spiderweb and jigsaw pattern on their respective sides that each represent him as young Moriarty in their own ways. The web is a common motif between his older and younger versions, and I interpret the puzzle pieces representing the fact that he is the incomplete version of the rival to Holmes, a, as of now, unsolved puzzle. In his arms, we can see what looks like a map and a ruler, which according to his skills can turn into any weapon. It's not that important, I just thought it was funny. And maybe most notably, we have his staff and the 3 lanterns orbiting around him. While I'm not certain of this, I think the lanterns themselves are the Norns, the goddesses of fate blended in with him, and the staff he wields gives off the same light as them. So I believe this ornate weapon is indicative of his control over the fates. It's a very busy design, maybe just a bit too much so, and it mainly serves to connect him to his older self, something his later arts aren't as interested in doing. Which you can see in his second art, which sticks him in black militaristic attire that sees him looking like some kind of king. He seems like he's trying to ooze authority here with that long black cape and the regal blue inside and all the gold adorning it. And yeah, for the most part, it works. If I saw him without any context for who he was, I'd likely assume he was some kind of dictator, which given his goals, isn't too far off from the truth. He's an arrogant man seeking power, and judging from how his staff is upgraded, I'd say he's found it. The already fancy symbol has gotten even more ornate and is giving off even greater light. He looks like some kind of evil dictator here, something his third art only follows up on. His staff has ditched the light bulb aesthetic it had for a crown and flamethrowers on it, and at this point just ready to show off his authority. He's also switched out his black attire for white to make him look even more like the pompous egomaniac he is. He wants nothing more than to flex his superiority here, and the domineering eyes with blue, white, and gold of his outfit prove that. He's declaring himself emperor here, and he wants you to bow before his majesty. Shown off best by his final art, where the spider sits on his throne, lazily resting his head while gripping his crown. The threads comprising his schemes and fate alike surround him, waiting for the next tug to bring things back into his favor. His throne is comprised of a pattern of blue and black jigsaw pieces, which are a contrast to his unfinished looking cape from earlier, because now it seems like pieces are missing. He's now declaring himself the unsolvable puzzle, because the greatest declaration Moriarty could make is that he is an unsolvable riddle. The only flaw here, I think, is the lanterns. For someone mostly characterized as a schemer hiding in the background, having one of his trademark symbols being shining lights is kind of backwards, don't you think? If it just didn't work so hard against who he was, I'd say it's fine. And yeah, otherwise it's a great design. Again, his competition is just stiff. As we can see from the next entry, which is also the one most likely to get me killed alive, we have the angry goth mommy Kriemhild. I can't say for sure that people are going to roast me alive for her being down this low, but I have a feeling I should probably start preparing. But as a peace offering, let me say she has a perfect first art. The black outfit is just the absolute best pick for her. It not only looks like something that might be worn for mourning, fitting for a woman whose rage stems from the death of her husband, but it also contrasts nicely with her pale skin. The detailed design of the dress is fitting for her noble status, and her long hair and hat kind of finish that part up neatly. And then there's Balma. The holy sword turned demonic took some heavy notes from Soul Edge, looking as cursed as a sword can get. It's all black now, with a slit red eye in its middle, and a hole down its center, which could easily symbolize its own or Kriemhild's loss. It's a simple design that isn't jam-packed with symbolism, but it makes up for it with its straightforward storytelling. You can tell who she is just from this picture, an angry woman motivated by grief, who will go to any lengths to destroy those who have hurt her. And the second art has to screw it up by dropping the morning garb angle. Now it's just a red, black, and gold dress, which looks fine, but I can't think of a way to tie it into her character. It doesn't quite leave as strong of an impression on me either. It weakens the contrast between the black of her outfit and the white of her skin. It's a net negative that gives us nothing but something kinda nice to look at. Then the third art follows suit and gives us some fairly standard looking princess stuff. She's now in an armored gray and silver dress that keeps a lot of the prior black on it while removing the red. It's got some crosses here and there, and it looks plenty edgy for the angered princess, but once again doesn't tell us anything about her, which is a great shame when the first art did such a good job of it. To make it worse, the final art is a fairly basic action pose in this outfit, which looks good, but not deeply significant. It's sad to see such a good design just move backward like it does. But because the first art is so good, I can't think of putting her anywhere lower. Ironically though, in the spot above her, we'll find her attendant Zhang Ju, who is famous for forming the Yellow Turban Rebellion, which his first art has recontextualized in a more modern fashion. Not sure why he chose to wear this, guess the old guy just likes to try new things. Either way, how they recontextualize him here is interesting. With a suit, tie, hand gesture, and wristwatch, he gives me the vibe of a politician. He's gone from leader of a rebellion to leader of a political party. Given what he's wearing, I guess it's the Yellow Jacket Party now, because that piece of fabric is the main thing tying this design in with his later arts. Paired with the scar and long beard, he has several defining traits that make him immediately recognized as Zhang Ju no matter what the ascension. Which is important because the second art not only changes scenes on us, but also makes the incredibly rare move of having a major change in the servant's pose. He looks angrier here, like he's ready to toast the people who stand against him. His yellow jacket is swapped for a black and red one that keeps the overall color scheme consistent, since the yellow is now spread to most of its other clothing. Clothes which depict a dragon, I must add, which is probably more thematically relevant than I realize, but either way, dragons are cool, so more power to Zhang Ju. And I mean that literally, because the third art shows us further on in the scene. Zhang Ju and the flags behind him are tattered and worn down, but still standing. He's begun to float and is calling a storm with his sage arts, bringing devastation to those who are fighting him. Despite his clothes looking worse off, he himself looks better than ever, with a confident and malicious grin on his face as he steadily controls the weather around him. The old man is imposing and dominating, and you don't have a chance of escaping his might, which is heavily contrasted by the final art. He's back in his clothes from the second art, enjoying some tea while watching some kids run by his window, with a calm and content smile on his face. Because for as powerful and devious Zhang Ju is, ultimately, he's looking to make a better world. The ramping intensity of the art sets an idea of who he is, is, only for the finale to catch you off guard and reveal to you that, at his core, this old man is a kind soul. Just not quite as nice as our next servant, Charlemagne. To put it succinctly, Charlie here is a good blend of JRPG and shonen protagonists. The white, black, and blue outfit is meant to do one thing and one thing only: make him look like a cool, upstanding hero. And it works. From one look, you can tell just who this guy is and what he is about. The sword and coat in particular scream hero to me, and the white in his hair and glowing red arm are the finishing touches to make it look like he just jumped off the pages of an action manga. Of course, there is more to him than that. The armor on his legs and arm make him look suitably knightly, and paint this image of him being some great king of knights, perhaps, which is exactly who Charlie is. Or this Charlie, at least. And his second art develops his character a bit. As he himself says, this is how he looks when he needs to command an army. And he is right for the change, because this turns him into an undisputed leader. The armor is bulked up and makes him seem larger and more imposing, something the much larger cape draped around him helps to sell. It also makes him look much more rectangular, so even with the same pose, he looks much sturdier and reliable here. And the fact that all of this is white and silver is a display of his majesty. He is more than a hero here, he is a symbol for everyone who serves under him. A larger-than-life figure that commands his army justly and without hesitation. And those black and red straps hanging from his arms tease the other half of who he is, the father of Europe. Which comes to the forefront with his third art, which bulks his armor further and splits it down the middle, half retaining the silver of his first arts, and half donning the golden armor of his real-life counterpart, Charles the Great. This is Charlemagne, fully embracing both halves of who he is, the fantastical hero melded with the great emperor, and the two halves complement and contrast wonderfully here. Both look majestic, but the silver has this heroic feel to it, while the gold is just pure majesty. The red and black cloth on him heightens the contrast to make for an even more stunning design. And the sword he wielded being split into those same red and black colors, but switched for some variety, is just the icing on this cake. Said sword, by the way, has a silver handle and golden crossguard to keep both elements incorporated into it. And finally, to drive it home, is a crown with the same silver and gold divide to declare him king. It is a great way to pay homage to a design that, as of making this, still isn't in Fate Go, and is the perfect display of who Charlemagne is in both myth and legend. But this Charlie is still just the fantastical half of him. So the final art takes us back to that first form. A simple adventurer offering his companion an orange. It's pretty basic, but the sweat pouring off his smiling face more than exemplifies who he is. A simple guy who enjoys traveling and doesn't mind taking things easy from time to time. It's incredibly relaxed and shows how charming he can be. Because this Charlie isn't the emperor standing above and commanding everyone. He's the guy who's going to tag around with you because he thinks you're going somewhere interesting. This design just perfectly emphasizes his charms. And speaking of charming, we're coming up to a character who was way more likable than I expected. Johanna. Crow, she wasn't released during Traum. We aren't getting her till Shush, my friend. I get where you're coming from. We don't even have Johanna in NA yet, so she doesn't really need to be in the list. To that I respond with, she's cool, shut up, I do what I want, and have a nice day. Jokes aside though, I considered for a bit whether to include her or not, but in the end, after looking through her design, I just couldn't resist talking about her. Which might seem surprising given how basic her first art is. She wears a red and white church robe with a cross necklace and gray hood. She has what's presumably a Bible in one hand and an owl perched on the other. It's an incredibly simple design that, thanks to her hair and the owl, gives her their distinct silhouette. And basic is what we're looking for here, because Johanna's art does a great job at showing us progression. This first art is simply showing a low member of the church, a young woman, who can be passed off as a pretty guy, who's still learning and growing. However, as the second art shows us, this lowly church member rises to become the Pope. Rather than the owl, she now clutches a cross staff, the very symbol of her faith. Speaking of crosses, her robes are covered in them, which is fitting for her position as the highest authority of her religion. The red, white, and gold robes gives her an air of majesty. She isn't just some member of the church anymore, she is the main figure of the organization now. But it doesn't completely disconnect from the first design though, keeping the same colors, just making them more extravagant, so she feels the part of a religious leader. Put simply, she looks like the Pope she's supposed to be, and it's a natural evolution from the first art, which makes it even more interesting when it's completely flipped around by the third art, which changes the reds and golds to silvers and blues, and most notably, plays into Johanna's femininity. In an astounding show of restraint from Fate, it's the first art to actually make her breasts notable, and the slit in her robe reveals her leg. It's not super sexual, but it does strongly state that she's a woman, something her prior arts were doing their best to conceal. She keeps the symbols that keep her associated with the church and papacy, but with the changing colors it feels disconnected from what we saw before. Perfect for this fictional popus who represents the faith without actually ever having been a real part of it. It's the perfect amount of distance from the normal look to keep them tied together while showcasing a clear difference. It's unconstrained and graceful here, playing fully into who and what Johanna is, and it sells her holy status by showing us the stylized halo above her. And as a side note here, that slit in her dress that creates a water pattern can be interpreted in two ways I can think of. The first most probable way is just an homage to holy water, but the second gets weird. See, in most accounts, the way Johanna is revealed as a woman is when she gives birth while attending to her duties. So for the art that reveals her to be a woman to use water as a symbol of that is kind of interesting. And it all culminates together in a final art which is cute. Yeah, it doesn't really do a whole lot other than make her look cute, so I don't have much to say about it. It shows off her long hair better than the last art, which ties in the whole femininity thing, but not enough to be especially great. Still, this is one of the unexpectedly better designs in Fate Go from a character I unexpectedly like. She's one of the rare servants to show progression in her arts in any meaningful way. Unfortunately for her, she's not the only person in Traum to do that. Heck, she's not even the only character mostly defined by fiction to do it, as the best designed servant in Traum is undoubtedly Don Quixote. And Sancho too, by proxy, I guess. I mean, just a look at that majestic figure. How could you argue? Despite his short stature, Don Quixote starts off with his majestic golden armor and cape and plume flowing in the wind. The proud bird flying on his helmet matches his own honor and noble soul, and adds a few inches to close up for the height gap at least a little bit. And speaking of his lacking height, his lance more than makes up for it, being a mighty weapon that stands taller than most men, and looking every part equal to his heroism. But let's turn our eyes to Sancho for a moment. We see her in fairly standard maid attire, complete with apron, jacket, and bonnet that shows her off as the greatest support Don Quixote could ask for. Of course, she also has the horse features to clue us into who she really is, an amalgamation of the characters from his stories, including his trusty mount. This striking duo might not look the fiercest, but they radiate dignity, and Don Quixote is exactly the man he always imagined himself to be. But that's the issue, isn't it? He isn't the man he imagines himself to be. No, he's just an old man, not a dazzling hero in gold performing great feats for the people. Of course, he still retains his pride, just with less of the sheen. His golden armor is traded out for iron, and the overall shape of his helmet and armor stay sharp, but definitely look less heroic. The ornamental bird is now entirely gone, and his white cape is now a dark red. Even the almost divine look of his lance is now a much simpler and practical iron. He still looks the part of the soldier at the very least, but not like the great knight he desires to be. Meanwhile, Sancho has ditched her maid outfit for a fairly simple blue and white dress that keeps her looking like a gentle figure looking out for the elderly knight. But while her companion has shifted to looking more common, she's grown more fanciful, a trend that will continue as fantasy fades further, and we see the true Don Quixote. He's little more than a short, pudgy old man wearing tattered armor covered in gashes with holes littering his cape. His helmet is chipped and it's missing its top, and his frail old hands aren't even protected here. Even his beard, a majestic mound of hair that kept him looking joyful's fallen flat. His once proud spear shares the fate of his armor, being torn up and worn down. But despite it all, he still stands proud, because Don Quixote is more than the man he imagined himself to be. Even without the fancy weapon or the most illustrious armor, he will still fight, because he is at the very least a good man who stands by his principles. Meanwhile, his companion takes on a brilliant purple dress that glistens in the light and has beautiful patterns woven throughout it. The tiara and necklace adorning her give her a noble image, and she looks every part a princess from some fantastic tale. But even with all this, her main concern is Don Quixote, who she looks at with concern here. And the soft ribbons on the dress still keep the gentle shape language that makes up her half of the design. But what does it all mean? Why does Don Quixote lose his fanciful getup while Sancho only grows more so? Well, the final art has the answer. It's a quiet scene, just the aged man resting his head on the lap of his companion, napping in the shade of a tree while they gaze at him with a gentle smile. This is who they are. Don Quixote is a frail man whose best years are far behind him, who doesn't even own the decent armor to protect himself with. But nevertheless, he still dreams. He sees himself living out wondrous adventures, saving the people and slaying ferocious monsters. And even when he stirs from his slumber and greets the realities of the world, those fantasies stay with him. Even when he knows he isn't a great hero, he still stands and fights because that's what he believes is right. And that fantasy never leaves him. It stands beside him, literally in this case through Sancho, the embodiment of the fanciful tales he believed of himself. She supports him relentlessly, and as we see here, does her all to take care of him. Because even if they are mostly fantasy, it doesn't mean they don't matter. Fantasy gives us the strength to push on, to try and live our lives the way we want to. It connects us with others and rallies them to our cause. It's a grand thing that supports feeble humanity, and it's what we look to when reality becomes too much. Fate Go doesn't look down on Don Quixote for being a delusional old man. It celebrates his dreaming, and he is the perfect representative of Lostbelt 6.5, because Traum is all about the power fiction has over reality. And that is why he is the best designed servant of Traum, because he is a microcosm of it. He is the man who can change the world around him because of his flights of fancy. And they are the reason he can stand proudly, not only as the best designed servant of Traum, but as one of the best designs in Fate Grand Order. Or maybe you totally disagree with the way I'm seeing things. If so, tell me why. Perspective is a fun thing, so I'd appreciate it at least. I hope you enjoyed. You probably did if you watched this far. So why don't you do those nice things like and subscribe? I'd appreciate it. Character design in Fate Grand Order is a fun thing to talk about, I think. So why don't you tell me if you want me to do more of these breakdowns of all the servants in any given singularity story chat. But no matter what you thought, thank you for listening to my insane ramblings. See you next time.